The moment Melody Carter stepped onto the gleaming stage of the Archer Theatre in downtown Boston, the judges had already decided her fate. Despite her extraordinary talent, her second-hand blazer and lack of connections sealed her rejection until a single phone call exposed the truth about who she really was and brought the entitled casting director to her knees. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain pattered against the tall windows of the Archer Theatre, creating a melancholic backdrop to the tension inside. Melody Carter stood in the back of the ornate lobby, her fingers nervously tracing the worn edges of her audition materials. The historic theatre, with its gold-leafed ceilings and crystal chandeliers, had once been the crown jewel of Boston's theatre district. Now, after a $50 million renovation funded by Blackwood Entertainment, it gleamed even brighter, its legacy secured for another generation of performers, but not performers like Melody. She glanced down at her outfit, a navy blazer purchased from a thrift store paired with a simple white blouse and black slacks that had seen better days. Around her, other actresses chatted confidently, their designer clothes and professional headshots marking them as insiders, women who belonged in these hallowed halls. Women who hadn't spent the morning making lattes at a coffee shop to pay their rent. "Number 47, called out a bored voice. A slim woman with sharp features and even sharper stilettos peered over her clipboard, eyes scanning the waiting area. Melody raised her hand. "That's me." The woman, Tiffany Winters, according to her name badge, gave Melody a quick once-over, her perfectly arched eyebrows rising slightly. "Follow me. The panel doesn't have all day." Melody gathered her things and followed Tiffany down the corridor, their footsteps echoing against the marble floors. Portraits of famous actors who had graced the Archer's stage lined the walls, their faces frozen in theatrical glory. Melody had studied them all, dreamed of joining their ranks since she was a little girl performing in her grandmother's living room. "They're seeing about 60 women today for the 5 female roles," Tiffany said over her shoulder, her tone making it clear she didn't consider Melody to be serious competition. Director Elaine Montgomery is looking for something specific. The way she emphasized specific sent a chill down Melody's spine. "I've prepared 2 monologues," Melody replied, keeping her voice steady. "Classic and contemporary, as requested." Tiffany stopped at a set of double doors and turned, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Just a friendly tip. Elaine values presence as much as performance. The Archer has a certain reputation to maintain." Before Melody could respond, Tiffany pushed open the doors to the theater. The majestic auditorium stretched before them, 800 plush red seats facing the stage where countless dreams had been realized or shattered. At the center of the theater, illuminated by a single spotlight, stood a simple wooden stool. In the first few rows sat the audition panel, Elaine Montgomery, the theater's notoriously demanding artistic director, Cameron Reed, the handsome young associate director whose family connections had secured his position, and Victoria Harlow, the theater's major benefactor, whose approval could make or break a production. 47, Tiffany announced, stepping aside. Melody walked onto the stage, the spotlight temporarily blinding her. She blinked, adjusting to the glare as she set her bag down beside the stool. "Name and experience," Elaine called out, not looking up from the papers in front of her. "Melody Carter. I graduated from Suffolk County Community College with an associate's degree in theater arts. I've performed with the East Harbor Playhouse for 3 seasons, most recently as Laura in The Glass Menagerie and Beatrice in Much Ado About Nothing." Today, at the mention of community college, Cameron and Victoria exchanged glances. Elaine's pen paused mid-note. "East Harbor," Elaine repeated, her tone suggesting she'd never heard of it. Remind me where that is? It's a small theatre in Millfield, Melody explained. About an hour north of the city. Elaine hummed dismissively. And do you have representation? Not currently. Another exchanged glance between the panel members. Another nail in her professional coffin. Well, Elaine sighed, gesturing vaguely toward the stage. Whenever you're ready. Melody took a deep breath, centering herself. She'd chosen a monologue, In From Doubt, by John Patrick Shanley, challenging material that showcased emotional range and subtlety. She closed her eyes for a moment, transforming herself into Sister Aloysius, a woman fighting for what she believed was right, against overwhelming opposition. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer Melody Carter, the barista with second-hand clothes. She was fierce, determined, righteous in her convictions. Her voice filled the theatre without strain, each word precisely chosen and delivered. She moved with purpose, her gestures economical yet expressive. For 2 minutes she wasn't auditioning, she was performing, existing fully in the character's truth. When she finished, there was silence. Melody stood still, heart pounding, waiting for a response. Cameron scribbled something on his notepad without looking up. Victoria checked her watch. That was... Elaine began, her voice flat. Technically, proficient. But I am not sure I believe you as Sister Aloysius. The character requires a certain gravitas. Melody nodded, swallowing her disappointment. Would you like to see my classical piece? I've prepared Lady Macbeth's Unsex Me Here soliloquy. That won't be necessary, Elaine replied, already shuffling her papers. We have a very specific vision for this season, and I'm just not seeing you fitting into our ensemble. Victoria leaned forward, her diamond bracelet catching the light. The Archer has a particular brand, dear. Our patrons expect a certain caliber of performer. I understand, Melody said, though she didn't, not really. She had given one of her best performances, yet they had barely watched. What exactly were they looking for that she lacked? Thank you for coming in, Cameron added with practiced sympathy. Tiffany will show you out. Tiffany appeared at the side of the stage, clipboard in hand, ready to usher in the next hopeful. This way, please. As Melody gathered her things, she overheard Cameron whispering to Elaine, seriously, Laura in Glass Menagerie at a community theatre? What's next? Someone who played Hamlet in their backyard? Soft laughter followed her as she exited the stage. In the corridor, away from the eyes of the panel, Melody's composed facade began to crack. This had been her fourth rejection in 3 weeks. Boston's theatre community was tight-knit and exclusive, seemingly impenetrable to outsiders like her. Talent, notwithstanding. Better luck next time, Tiffany said without conviction as she led Melody back to the lobby. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. Through the glass doors, Melody could see the streets had become small rivers, pedestrians hurrying past with umbrellas and raincoats. Do you have an umbrella I could borrow? She asked Tiffany. I didn't realize it would rain today. Tiffany glanced at her unapologetically. Sorry, theatre policy, no lending to non-company members. Of course, another reminder that she didn't belong. As Tiffany turned to leave, the lobby doors swung open and a group of women entered, shaking out their umbrellas and laughing together. They were dressed immaculately in designer clothes, exuding the easy confidence of those born into privilege. Leading them was Isabel Blackwood, daughter of Maxwell Blackwood, the entertainment mogul whose company had funded the Archer's renovation. Isabel's eyes swept the lobby and landed briefly on Melody. There was a flicker of recognition, quickly, replaced by practiced indifference. They had met once before. At a workshop, Melody had scraped together the money to attend. Isabel had been there too, not because she needed the training, but because her father had bought her a spot. Isabel! Tiffany exclaimed. her entire demeanor transforming into eager deference. "I didn't know you were auditioning today." Isabel smiled, removing her Burberry coat to reveal an outfit that probably cost more than Melody's monthly rent. "Daddy thought it would be good exposure before my film premieres next month. Is Elaine ready for me?" "Of course, I'll take you right in." Tiffany turned to Melody one last time. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The exit is that way. Good luck with whatever comes next." Melody stood alone in the grand lobby, clutching her folder of monologues, watching as the theater's doors, literally and figuratively, closed in her face. She pushed through, the exit into the downpour, her thin blazer offering little protection against the deluge. Water soaked through her clothes within seconds as she hurried down the street toward the bus stop. Her makeup ran in streaks down her face, mingling with tears she could finally allow herself to shed. By the time she reached the shelter of the bus stop canopy, she was completely drenched. Melody dropped onto the bench, not caring that the seat was already wet. She pulled out her phone, protected in the inner pocket of her blazer, and stared. At the screen, her finger hovered over a contact she had promised herself she wouldn't call, at least not for something like this. Nate. Her husband's name glowed on the screen. Nathaniel Foster, who had encouraged her to pursue her dreams despite the odds, who had believed in her talent when no one else did, who had connections she had steadfastly refused to use. The bus wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes. Her shift at Perks Coffee began in an hour. She would barely have time to change into her uniform, let alone dry off properly. And beyond the immediate discomfort lay the crushing weight of rejection, the sneaking suspicion that perhaps she didn't have what it took after all. Before she could reconsider, Melody pressed the call button. "Hey, beautiful," Nate's warm voice answered on the second ring. "How'd it go?" The genuine hope in his tone made her throat tighten. "Not great." "What happened?" His voice immediately sharpened with concern. "The usual. Took one look at me and decided I wasn't Archer material. They barely watched my monologue before showing me the door." "Which one did you do?" "Sister Aloysius, from Doubt. You've been working on that for weeks. It was incredible last night." "Well, Elaine Montgomery didn't think so." Melody sighed, watching the rain puddle around her feet. "Isabel, Blackwood showed up right as I was leaving. They practically rolled out the red carpet for her. Maxwell Blackwood's daughter, the one who can't act her way out of a paper bag?" Despite everything, Melody smiled at his indignation. "That's the one." There was a pause on the line, filled with the sound of Nate's breathing and distant office noise. She could picture him in his sleek corner office at Foster Media Group, the company his grandfather had founded and his father had expanded into one of the most influential media conglomerates on the East Coast. Nathaniel Foster, Executive Vice President of Digital Content, with the power to make or break entertainment careers with a single phone call. Nathaniel Foster, who she had met 3 years ago when she was catering an industry event, and he was the only person who had bothered to learn her name. Nathaniel Foster, who had fallen in love with her talent before he'd fallen in love with her. Nathaniel Foster, whose influence she had specifically asked him never to use on her behalf. "Where are you now?" he asked finally. "Bus stop outside the Archer, soaking wet and feeling sorry for myself." "Stay there." "What?" "No, Nate. I have to get to work." "Call in sick. I can't afford to lose the hours." "Melody," his voice gentled. "Just this once, let me help, please." She looked up at the rain-soaked street, at the gleaming facade of the Archer Theatre just visible in the distance. What was the point of principles if they kept her dreams perpetually out of reach? What was the value of earning everything on Her own merit if the game was rigged from the start. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll be there in 15 minutes." While she waited, Melody watched as other rejected actresses hurried from the theater to waiting Ubers or the warmth of nearby cafes. Some looked resigned, others devastated. A few wore the same determined expression she recognized from her own mirror, the stubborn refusal to give up despite every indication that they should. True to his word, exactly 15 minutes later, a sleek black Tesla pulled up to the curb. Nate stepped out, umbrella in hand, and jogged to where she sat. At 34, he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never had to doubt his place in the world. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than everything in Melody's closet combined, but he wore it with a casual elegance that never felt showy. "Jesus, Mel, you're soaked through," he said, reaching for her hand. She let him pull her up, suddenly conscious of how bedraggled she must look. "Sorry about your car seats." "Screw the car seats." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding the umbrella over them both as he guided her to the Tesla. "Let's get you warm." Once inside the heated luxury of the car, Nate handed her a soft blanket from the back seat and cranked up the heat. "I had Dina cancel your shift at Perks, said you had a family emergency." "Nate, you can't just—" "I already did." His tone brooked no argument. "Now tell me exactly what happened in there." As the car idled at the curb, Melody recounted the audition in detail, the dismissive glances, Elaine's half-hearted attention, the whispered jokes, and Tiffany's condescension. With each revelation, Nate's expression darkened. "And you're sure they didn't actually watch your performance?" he asked when she finished. "Cameron was writing something the whole time." Victoria checked her watch twice. "Elaine?" Melody shrugged. "She was looking at me, but not seeing me, if that makes sense. Like she'd already decided." "Based on what? Your resume?" "My clothes, probably. My lack of connections. The fact that I went to community college instead of Juilliard or Tisch." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Take your pick." Nate's fingers tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles going white. He stared through the rain-spattered windshield at the theater's entrance, where Tiffany was now escorting another young actress inside, an umbrella held accommodatingly over the newcomer's head. "That's it," he said, his voice quiet but determined. "I've respected your wishes for 3 years, Mel. I've watched you fight 10 times harder than anyone else for half the opportunities. I've seen you come home from auditions like this more times than I can count." "Nate!" "No." He turned to her, green eyes fierce with a conviction that made her breath catch. "There's a difference between wanting to earn something on your own merits and being systematically excluded regardless of your talent. This isn't about giving you an unfair advantage. It's about leveling an already unfairly tilted playing field." Melody looked down at her damp slacks, at the folder of monologues she had prepared so carefully. She thought about the coffee shop, uniform hanging in her locker, waiting for her to punch in for another shift, serving actresses who could afford to pursue their dreams without worrying about making rent. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked carefully. "I'm suggesting we go back in there and have a conversation with Elaine Montgomery about the Archer's casting practices." He reached across the console and took her hand. "Together." "You mean, tell them who you are, who I am?" Nate smiled, a dangerous edge to the curve of his lips. "Exactly that. They'll think I only got an audition because of you. No, they'll realize they rejected someone with genuine talent because they were too caught up in their own elitism to see it." He squeezed her hand. "This isn't about getting you a role you don't deserve, Mel. This is about making them actually look at your work instead of your clothes." Melody bit her lip, considering. She had spent years building a wall between her professional life and Nate's influence, determined to succeed or fail on her own terms. But what if that determination had become its own kind of prison? "What would we even say?" she asked. We'll figure that out when we're inside. Nate's eyes softened. But whatever happens, I promise we leave there with your dignity intact. Rain continued to drum on the roof of the car as Melody made the hardest decision of her career. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said, squaring her shoulders. "Let's do it." Nate leaned across the console and kissed her forehead. "That's my girl." They exited the car together, sharing the umbrella as they walked back toward the Archer's grand entrance. Despite her damp clothes and smudged makeup, Melody felt a strange calm settling over her. Whatever happened next, she would face it with the same courage she brought to every performance. The same glass doors that had witnessed her dejected exit now swung open to admit them. The lobby was busier than before, filled with chattering actresses and theater staff. Heads turned as they entered, not because anyone recognized them yet, but because of the striking contrast they presented. Melody in her simple, rain-soaked outfit beside Nate in his impeccable designer suit. Tiffany was at her post by the reception desk, eyebrows raised in surprise as she spotted Melody. "Excuse me, the auditions are closed to observers." "I'm not here to observe," Melody replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'm here to speak with Elaine Montgomery." Tiffany's expression hardened. "Ms. Montgomery is in the middle of auditions and cannot be disturbed." "I think she'll make time for us," Nate said smoothly, extending his hand. "Nathaniel Foster, Executive VP of Foster Media Group. I'd like to discuss some potential concerns about the Archer's casting process." The effect was immediate. Tiffany's eyes widened, darting between Nate's confident smile and Melody's composed expression as connections formed in her mind. "Foster Media, as in the parent company of Blackwood Entertainment?" she stammered. "The very same," Nate confirmed. "We acquired Blackwood last year, which makes us, effectively, the major funding source for this theater's recent renovation." Tiffany's face drained of color. "I'll let Ms. Montgomery know you're here right away, Mr. Foster." As she scurried away, Melody leaned closer to Nate. "I thought you weren't going to use the company connection." "I'm not using it to get you a role," he replied quietly. "I'm using it to get us in the door. What happens after that is all about your talent." Before she could respond, Tiffany reappeared, remarkably more solicitous than before. "Ms. Montgomery can see you in her office. Right this way, please." As they followed Tiffany through the lobby, Melody noticed Isabel Blackwood standing with her friends near the theater entrance. Isabel's expression shifted from confusion to shock as she recognized first Melody, then Nate. "Is that Nathaniel Foster?" Melody heard one of Isabel's friends whisper, "With her." Tiffany led them down a different corridor than before, this one lined with production photos from the Archer's illustrious history. At the end stood an imposing oak door with a brass nameplate, Elaine Montgomery, Artistic Director. Tiffany knocked twice, then opened the door. "Mr. Foster and Ms. Carter to see you, Ms. Montgomery." Elaine's office was exactly what Melody would have expected, tastefully decorated in theatrical memorabilia, awards displayed prominently on bookshelves, a large desk positioned to maximize the impression of authority. Elaine herself stood behind the desk, her earlier dismissive demeanor replaced by a mask of professional courtesy. "Mr. Foster," she said, extending her hand. "What an unexpected pleasure. I wasn't aware you had an interest in our little audition process." Nate shook her hand firmly. "I have an interest in many things, Ms. Montgomery, including fair evaluation of talent regardless of background or connections." Elaine's smile faltered slightly as her gaze shifted to Melody. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by calculation. "Ms. Carter, was it, from this morning's audition?" "Yes," Melody confirmed simply. "Please, both of you, sit." Elaine gestured to the chairs facing her desk, her expression now guarded. "What can I do for you today?" As they took their seats, Nate placed a protective hand on Melody's still damp knee. I believe my wife deserves a second audition, one where she's actually seen, not just looked at. The word wife landed like a thunderclap in the quiet office. Elaine's practiced composure slipped, revealing genuine surprise. Your wife? Melody Foster, Nate clarified, though she performs under her maiden name, Carter. We've been married for 2 years. Elaine's gaze darted between them, reassessing everything about the woman she had so quickly dismissed hours earlier. I wasn't aware. That was intentional. Melody spoke up, finding strength in Nate's presence beside her. I wanted to earn roles based on my ability, not my husband's connections. Admirable, Elaine murmured, though her tone suggested she found it foolish. The problem, Nate continued, is that the system seems designed to make that impossible. When talented performers are dismissed based on superficial factors before they've even had a chance to demonstrate their skills, something is fundamentally wrong with the process. Elaine straightened in her chair, professional defenses rising. Mr. Foster, I assure you our casting decisions are based entirely on artistic merit and suitability for specific roles. Are they? Nate challenged. Because from what I've heard, my wife delivered an exceptional monologue this morning to an audience that had already decided not to cast her. We see dozens of actresses, and yet you couldn't be bothered to actually watch one of them perform. Melody interjected, surprising herself with her boldness. Cameron wrote through my entire piece. Victoria checked her watch twice. And you... She met Elaine's gaze directly. You were looking at me, but all you saw was my thrift store blazer and community college degree. Elaine's lips pressed into a thin line. That's quite an accusation. It's an observation, Melody countered, unsupported by the fact that you couldn't tell me a single detail about the performance I just gave. The room fell silent as Elaine absorbed this challenge. Her eyes narrowed, recalculating the dynamics of power in the room. What exactly are you looking for here? She finally asked, addressing Nate rather than Melody. A guaranteed role, special treatment, because I should remind you that artistic integrity. We're looking for fairness, Nate interrupted. A genuine opportunity. For Melody to be evaluated on her talent alone. Nothing more, nothing less. And if I refuse? Nate leaned forward slightly. Then I would be forced to reconsider Foster Media's continuing support of the Archers programming. Not as retaliation, but as a matter of principle. We prefer to invest in institutions that value artistic merit above social connections. The threat, for all its polite phrasing, was unmistakable. Elaine's expression hardened, but she was too experienced to show panic. I see. I hope you do, Nate replied, because this isn't just about Melody. It's about every talented performer who gets overlooked because they don't fit some predetermined mold of what an actor should look or sound like. Melody watched the calculation happening behind Elaine's eyes, weighing the potential loss of funding against the compromise of her authority. After a long moment, the director sighed. Very well, I'm willing to watch Ms. Carter audition again, with my full attention this time. She checked her watch. We can do it now if you're prepared. The stage is currently free. Melody exchanged a glance with Nate, who squeezed her knee in silent support. This was what they had come for, a fair chance. But something still felt wrong about the entire situation. Actually, Melody said slowly, I don't think I want to audition for you again. Both Elaine and Nate looked at her in surprise. Melody, Nate began, but she held up a hand to stop him. No, hear me out. She turned to Elaine. An audition, under these circumstances, wouldn't be genuine either. You'd be watching me through the lens of who my husband is, not who I am as an artist. That's no better than dismissing me for my background. Elaine frowned. Then what do you propose? Melody took a deep breath. I propose you implement blind initial auditions. Record submissions without names or photos attached. Judge them solely on performance quality before meeting candidates in person. That way, everyone gets a fair evaluation based on talent first. That's unusual for theatre casting, Elaine said, though her tone had shifted from dismissive to thoughtful. It's been proven effective in orchestras, Melody pointed out. When they started using screens during auditions so judges couldn't see the musicians, the number of women selected increased dramatically. An interesting parallel, Elaine admitted. Nate watched Melody with unmistakable pride. What my wife is suggesting would benefit all actors, not just her. It's a chance for the Archer to pioneer a more equitable approach to casting. The suggestion hung in the air between them. Elaine drummed her fingers on her desk, considering. And if I were to implement such a system, she asked finally, then Foster Media would be proud to continue supporting the Archer's artistic endeavors, Nate replied smoothly. In fact, we might even consider expanding our involvement to fund a diversity initiative alongside it. Melody could see the exact moment Elaine's resistance crumbled. The director nodded slowly, a new respect visible in her eyes as she looked at Melody. I'll bring it to the board next week, she promised. I can't guarantee they'll approve it, but I'll advocate for it. Thank you, Melody said sincerely. As they stood to leave, Elaine cleared her throat. For what it's worth, Miss Carter, or rather Mrs. Foster, I would like to see your classical monologue sometime, when the circumstances are more appropriate. I'd like that, Melody replied, surprised to find she meant it. Outside Elaine's office, Melody leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted by the confrontation, but also exhilarated. I can't believe we just did that. Nate smiled, tucking a strand of damp hair behind her ear. I can. You were magnificent. I didn't get a role, though. No, you got something better, a chance to change the system. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. And when you do get cast here, which you will, it'll be because of your talent, not because of me. As they walked through the lobby, heads turned to follow them. Word had clearly spread about who they were. Isabel Blackwood stood frozen. Near the reception desk, her earlier confidence deflated as she watched them pass. Tiffany hurried forward, offering Melody a theater umbrella. For the rain, she said, her manner now deferential. And I'm sorry about earlier. Melody accepted the umbrella with gracious composure. Thank you. Outside, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. Nate opened the car door for Melody, then circled to the driver's side. As they pulled away from the Archer Theatre, Melody looked back at the grand old building with new eyes. Do you think anything will actually change? She asked. I think you just made sure it will, Nate replied. That's what I've always loved about you, Mel. You don't just want to succeed in a broken system, you want to fix it for everyone. Melody smiled, watching the theater recede in the side mirror. For the first time since she'd begun this journey, she felt like perhaps there was a place for her in this world after all. Not as Nathaniel Foster's wife, but as Melody Carter, actress and advocate. And that was worth far more than any role could ever be. The Tesla pulled away from the curb, leaving the Archer Theatre behind as Melody leaned back against the leather seat. Rain tapped a gentle rhythm on the roof, while the wipers swept back and forth in hypnotic arcs. She turned to look at Nate, studying his strong profile as he navigated through Boston's congested streets. I still can't believe we did that, she said, running her fingers through her damp hair. I've spent years determined to make it on my own, and then she gestured vaguely, threw it all away in one afternoon. Nate glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. Is that what you think happened back there? Isn't it? I called my powerful husband to rescue me after a bad audition." She looked down at her hands. "It's exactly what I swore I'd never do. That's not what I saw." Nate turned onto Commonwealth Avenue, the elegant brownstones lining the street partially obscured by mist. "I saw a talented woman finally standing up against a system designed to exclude her. And instead of demanding a role you didn't earn, you pushed for structural change that would benefit everyone." Melody remained quiet, processing his words. The heat from the car's vents had finally penetrated her damp clothes, but she still felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. "Where are we going?" she asked, noticing they weren't heading toward their apartment in Back Bay. "Foster, media headquarters," Nate replied. "I had Liz bring you some dry clothes. I thought you might want to sit in on my meeting with the board." "The board? Today?" Melody straightened. "What meeting?" "The one I'm scheduling as soon as we arrive." He shot her a quick smile. "We're overdue for a conversation about our arts funding initiatives, don't you think?" Melody stared at him. "You're serious. Dead serious." He reached across the console to squeeze her hand. "You just gave me a brilliant idea, and I'm not going to wait to implement it." 20 minutes later, they pulled into the underground parking garage of the gleaming Foster Media building in downtown Boston. Unlike the historical grandeur of the Archer, Foster Media embodied sleek modernity. 40 stories of glass and steel, housing one of the largest media conglomerates on the East Coast. As they rode the private elevator to the executive floor, Melody smoothed her hands over the simple but elegant gray dress Nate's assistant had brought for her. It fit perfectly. Liz had an uncanny ability to anticipate needs before they were expressed. "Nervous?" Nate asked, noticing her fidgeting. "A little," she admitted. "I've never been to one of your board meetings before." "Just be yourself," he said as the elevator doors opened. "They're going to love you." The executive floor hummed with purposeful activity. Assistants moved efficiently between offices, carrying tablets and coffee cups. Phones rang discreetly. Everything spoke of power wielded with restraint, exactly like Nate himself. Liz met them as they stepped off the elevator, her crisp white blouse and black pencil skirt as impeccable as always. At 45, she'd been with Foster Media longer than Nate had been an executive, and her loyalty to him was absolute. "I've called an emergency board meeting for 3:30, she informed them, handing Nate a folder. "Everyone's confirmed except Marion Rhodes, who's in Tokyo, but she'll video in. I've prepared the basic outlines for your proposal based on your text, but you'll need to fill in the details." "You're a miracle worker, Liz," Nate said with genuine appreciation. "Just doing my job." Liz turned to Melody with a warm smile. "The dress works." "It's perfect," Melody replied. "Thank you." "Coffee's in your office," Liz continued, already turning back to her desk. "And Richard called twice. He's curious about the emergency meeting." Nate grimaced. "I bet he is." Richard Foster, Nate's father and the company's CEO, was known for his hands-off management style, as long as the company continued to thrive. Emergency board meetings were not part of the usual protocol. In Nate's spacious corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. Unlike Elaine Montgomery's office with its theatrical memorabilia, Nate kept his space minimalist and functional. The only personal items were a small collection of photographs on his desk, one of his parents, one of his college graduation, and one of him and Melody on their wedding day, her face alight with laughter as he twirled her on a sun-dappled dance floor. "We have about 40 minutes before the meeting," Nate said, shrugging off his suit jacket and draping it over the back of his chair. "Let's figure out exactly what we want to propose." Melody settled into one of the comfortable chairs facing his desk. "Are you sure about this? Changing your company's entire arts funding approach because of one bad audition seems a bit extreme." "It's not because of one audition." Nate leaned against his desk, arms crossed. It's because of a pattern I've watched you deal with for years. How many times have you been dismissed without a fair chance? How many roles have gone to less talented actresses who had the right connections or the right look? This isn't impulsive. Mel, it's long overdue. She couldn't argue with that. The struggles she'd faced weren't unique to her. They were endemic to an industry that often valued packaging over substance. "So, what exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "A new initiative. Foster Media already funds numerous arts organizations across the country. What if we made that funding contingent on implementing blind initial auditions or evaluations, just like you suggested to Elaine?" Melody considered the scope of such a change. Foster Media's arts funding touched dozens of theaters, dance companies, and music organizations across the country. The impact could be massive. "You really think the board will go for it?" "Some will resist," Nate acknowledged. "Change always faces resistance, but the potential for positive PR alone should win over the pragmatists. And my father..." He smiled slightly. "Dad respects bold moves, even when he disagrees with them." They spent the next half hour outlining the proposal, with Melody offering insights based on her years in theatre. By the time Liz knocked on the door to announce the board was assembled, they had developed a comprehensive strategy that felt both revolutionary and achievable. "Ready?" Nate asked, straightening his tie. Melody took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready." The boardroom occupied the top floor of the building, its massive table surrounded by the 12 men and women who guided Foster Media's empire. Windows on 3 sides offered spectacular views of the city, now partly obscured by low clouds. At the head of the table sat Richard Foster, his silver hair and penetrating blue eyes, so like his son's, marking him unmistakably as Nate's father. Conversation halted as Nate and Melody entered, all eyes turning to assess this unexpected visitor to their inner sanctum. "Nathaniel," Richard greeted, rising slightly, "and Melody, this is a pleasant surprise." "Thanks for assembling on short notice," Nate replied, guiding Melody to 2 empty seats near the head of the table. "I believe everyone here has met my wife at company functions, but for those who haven't, this is Melody Carter Foster." Melody nodded politely as several board members offered smiles of recognition. She knew most of them by name from Nate's stories, if not from the occasional holiday party. "Now that we're all here," Richard said, resuming his seat, "perhaps you'd care to explain why you've called this emergency session." Liz was impressively vague. "I'd be happy to." Nate placed his hands flat on the table. "I'm proposing a significant change to our arts funding initiatives, one that I believe will position Foster Media as a leader in addressing systemic inequities in the creative industries we support." He outlined the proposal succinctly: a new requirement that arts organizations receiving Foster Media funding implement blind initial evaluation processes for performers, artists, and other creative roles. Organizations would have 1 year to develop their protocols, with Foster Media providing resources and guidance for the transition. "The goal," Nate explained, "is to ensure that talent, not connections or appearance or background, becomes the primary factor in who gets opportunities. We believe this will not only create more diverse and vibrant arts organizations, but will ultimately improve the quality of creative output by accessing previously overlooked talent pools." When he finished, there was a moment of contemplative silence. Then Marion Rhodes, joining via video from Tokyo, spoke first. "It's an intriguing proposal, Nathaniel. But what prompted this sudden interest in audition practices? Foster Media has never involved itself in the specific operations of our grant recipients before." Nate glanced at Melody, silently asking, "Permission?" She gave a slight nod. "Earlier today, my wife auditioned at the Archer Theatre," he began. "Despite her considerable talent and experience, she was dismissed after barely being allowed to perform, not because of her abilities, but because she didn't fit their preconceived notion of who belongs on their stage." "The Archer?" interjected Victoria Cunningham, the board's oldest member. "We just funded their renovation. $3 million, if I recall correctly." "Exactly," Nate confirmed, "which gives us significant leverage to influence their practices. But this isn't just about one theatre or one audition. It's about recognizing a pervasive problem across the arts and using our influence to address it." Richard Foster leaned forward, fingers steepled beneath his chin as he studied his son. "This is quite a departure from our usual hands-off approach to funding." "It is," Nate agreed, "but sometimes change requires bold action." "And you support this?" Richard asked, turning his penetrating gaze to Melody. She hadn't expected to be addressed directly and felt a momentary flutter of nervousness. But these were just people. Powerful people, certainly, but no more intimidating than an audience during a performance. "I do," she replied, her voice steady. "Not for my own benefit. I'm under no illusion that this will magically advance my career. But having spent years in regional theatre, I've seen countless talented performers excluded from opportunities because they didn't have the right look, or the right connections, or the right pedigree." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "The arts are supposed to reflect and illuminate the human experience in all its diversity. How can they do that when the people creating art represent such a narrow slice of humanity?" Victoria Cunningham nodded slowly. "Well said, my dear. Though I wonder if theatres will resist what they might view as interference in their artistic process." "Some will," Melody acknowledged, "but many are already having these conversations internally. They just need the push and the financial support to implement changes they already know are needed." Discussion flowed around the table, with board members raising concerns, suggesting refinements, and debating implementation strategies. Through it all, Melody noticed Richard Foster watching his son with an appraising expression that revealed nothing of his thoughts. Finally, after nearly an hour of discussion, Richard cleared his throat. "I believe we've heard enough to make a decision," he said, his authoritative tone quieting the room. "While this represents a significant shift in our funding approach, I find myself persuaded by the potential benefits both to the arts organizations we support and to Foster Media's public image." He turned to Nate. "You're proposing an initial one-year implementation period?" "Yes," Nate confirmed, "with quarterly evaluations to assess progress and refine our approach as needed. And the additional costs for resources and guidance. Approximately $7 million, which we can absorb from the existing Arts Initiative budget by restructuring some of our smaller grants." Richard nodded, then looked around the table. "I move that we approve Nathaniel's proposal for a one-year pilot program with continuation contingent on demonstrable progress toward the stated goals. All in favor?" Hands rose around the table, some immediately, others with slight hesitation, but ultimately all 12 board members signaled their approval. "Motion carried," Richard declared. "Nathaniel, I expect a detailed implementation. Plan on my desk by Monday. Work with the legal department to ensure our new requirements don't violate any existing grant agreements." "Of course," Nate agreed, unable to fully suppress a smile of satisfaction. As the meeting adjourned and board members filed out, Richard approached Melody while Nate was engaged in conversation with Marion Rhodes. "My son has always been passionate," Richard said, his voice lowered for privacy. "But I've never seen him champion a cause quite like this." "I tried to talk him out of it," Melody admitted, It seemed like such a drastic response to one bad audition. Richard's eyebrows rose. And yet here you are, supporting him anyway. Because he's right, she replied simply. The system is broken, and Foster Media has the power to help fix it. Interesting. Richard studied her with the same intensity Nate sometimes displayed. When Nathaniel first told me he was marrying an actress he'd met at a catered event, I had, concerns. I know, Melody said, holding his gaze. You had him investigated. Richard had the grace to look slightly abashed. A father worries, particularly when his son occupies a position that attracts certain types of people. Gold diggers, you mean? To put it bluntly, yes. He glanced toward Nate, who was still deep in conversation across the room. But watching you today, seeing how you pushed for systemic change rather than personal advantage, I can finally admit I was wrong about you. Thank you, Melody said, genuinely touched by this unexpected acknowledgement. That means a lot. Don't tell him I said this, Richard added, with a conspiratorial smile. But he's a better executive when you're influencing his decisions. More visionary, less concerned with quarterly projections. Before Melody could respond, Nate rejoined, them looking between his father and wife with curiosity. Should I be worried that you two are finally getting along? Absolutely, Richard replied with a rare display of humor. We're plotting to revolutionize the entire entertainment industry in ways you can't imagine. I believe it, Nate said, slipping an arm around Melody's waist. Dad, we're heading out. Dinner at the Astoria tomorrow night. Wouldn't miss it, Richard confirmed, squeezing his son's shoulder before departing with his characteristic purposeful stride. As they rode the elevator back down to the parking garage, Melody leaned her head against Nate's shoulder. That went better than I expected. They recognized a good idea when they heard it, Nate replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Though I think you won them over more than the proposal itself did. Me? I barely said anything. What? You said mattered. You spoke with authority and conviction about something you know intimately. That carries weight with people like Victoria and Marion. The elevator doors opened to the dimly lit garage where Nate's Tesla waited. As they walked toward it, Melody's phone buzzed with an incoming text. She glanced at the screen and stopped abruptly. What is it? Nate asked, concern creasing his brow. It's from Tiffany at the Archer, Melody replied, staring at the message in disbelief. Elaine wants to meet with me tomorrow morning. Already? That was fast. Nate peered over her shoulder at the screen. What do you think she wants? I have no idea, Melody admitted, slipping the phone back into her pocket. But I guess I'll find out. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, with no trace of the previous day's rain. Melody stood in their walk-in closet, contemplating her wardrobe with unusual care. What did one wear to a meeting that could either be an olive branch or an execution? The blue one, Nate suggested from the doorway, already dressed for his day in a charcoal suit. It brings out your eyes. Melody pulled out the dress he'd indicated, a simple but elegant sapphire sheath that she'd worn to their first anniversary dinner. Isn't it a bit much for a morning meeting? After yesterday, I'd say it's just enough. He crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Remember, you're not auditioning today. You're meeting as equals. Equals, she repeated, testing the word. That's going to take some getting used to. Start practicing, he advised, kissing her cheek before releasing her. Want me to come with you? Melody shook her head. No, I think I need to do this alone, but thank you for offering. An hour later, she walked through the same glass door she'd exited so dejectedly the day before. The lobby of the Archer looked different in morning light, less intimidating, more like what it was, a beautiful but ultimately ordinary building filled with ordinary people doing their jobs. Tiffany sat at the reception desk, her manner noticeably warmer as she greeted Melody. "Mrs. Foster, Ms. Montgomery is expecting you. Let me take you back." "Thank you, Tiffany, and please call me Melody." The walk to Elaine's office felt shorter than it had yesterday. Tiffany knocked once, then opened the door. "Melody Foster is here." "Thank you, Tiffany. Please come in, Mrs. Foster." Elaine rose from behind her desk, extending a hand. "Or do you prefer Ms. Carter professionally?" "Dear Melody is fine," she replied, shaking Elaine's hand firmly before taking a seat. "Thank you for meeting with me." Elaine settled back into her chair, studying Melody with new eyes. "I must admit yesterday was enlightening, in more ways than one." "For me as well," Melody acknowledged. "I spoke with the board chair last night," Elaine continued, "about your suggestion for blind initial auditions. And he was resistant, as I expected. Change always faces resistance in institutions like ours." Elaine leaned forward, her expression surprisingly open. "But then I received a call this morning from Richard Foster." Melody blinked in surprise. "Nate's father called you?" "Indeed. He informed me of Foster Media's new arts funding requirements. Quite comprehensive." A ghost of a smile touched Elaine's lips. Suddenly, the board chair was much more receptive to the idea. "I see," Melody said, uncertain how to respond. She hadn't expected Richard to move so quickly. "Don't misunderstand me," Elaine clarified. "I'm not opposed to the changes. In fact, after our conversation yesterday, I spent the evening thinking about my own career trajectory, how different it might have been if someone had truly seen my work before seeing me. This was unexpected. You faced similar challenges? Different era, same problems." Elaine sighed. "I was too ethnic for leading roles, too outspoken for supporting ones. I eventually switched to directing because it was the only way I could exercise any real creative control." She gestured to the walls of her office, adorned with production photos and awards. "I've built a good career, but I sometimes wonder what might have been if the playing field had been more level." Melody nodded, a new understanding dawning. "So you're implementing the blind audition process?" "We are, starting with the next production cycle." Elaine folded her hands on her desk. "But that's not why I asked you here today." "Oh? Our current production of The Winter's Tale closes in 3 weeks. We're holding auditions for our spring show next month, The Glass Menagerie, as it happens." She offered a thin smile. "I understand you've played Laura before?" "At East Harbor, yes. I'd like you to audition through the proper channels with the new blind submission process. No special treatment." Melody considered the offer. "And if I don't get cast?" "Then you don't get cast," Elaine said simply, "but you'll have had a fair evaluation based solely on your talent. Isn't that what you wanted?" It was exactly what she'd wanted. A chance to succeed or fail on her own merits. "Yes, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Elaine warned. "Our standards remain exacting, and the competition will be fierce. I wouldn't want it any other way." "Adi." As their meeting concluded and Melody prepared to leave, Elaine asked one final question. "Why did you do it this way? You could have simply had your husband insist we cast you." "Many would have." Melody paused in the doorway, considering. "Because a role obtained that way wouldn't mean anything, and because change that helps only one person isn't really change at all." Elaine nodded slowly. "Well said." Outside, the morning had blossomed into one of those perfect early autumn days that made Boston feel like the most beautiful city in the world. Melody pulled out her phone to call Nate, but hesitated. Instead, she texted her best friend and fellow struggling actress, Zoe. "Coffee at Perks in 20, big news." Zoe's reply came immediately. "On my way. Good news or bad news?" Melody smiled. As she typed her response, "Neither." different news. Perk's coffee shop occupied a cozy corner 3 blocks from the Archer. Melody had worked there for nearly 2 years, pulling espresso shots and making small talk with customers while dreaming. Of the day she could focus solely on acting. The familiar bell jingled as she pushed open the door. "Melody!" called Dina, the manager, from behind the counter. "I thought you were sick today." "Feeling much better," Melody replied with a smile. "Just came in for coffee. Is it okay if I sit for a bit? I'm meeting Zoe." "Course it is, honey. Your usual." "Please." Melody settled at her favorite corner table, watching the morning crowd of business people and students hurry past the windows. She'd spent countless hours at this same table, highlighting scripts or memorizing lines between shifts. It felt strange to be here as a customer rather than an employee. Zoe arrived 5 minutes later. Her curly hair barely contained by a messy bun, dark circles beneath her eyes, hinting at another late night working on her one-woman show. "You look suspiciously happy," she accused as she dropped into the chair, across from Melody. "Spill it." Melody related the events of the past 24 hours, starting with her disastrous audition and ending with Elaine's invitation to audition for the Glass Menagerie. Zoe's eyes grew progressively wider as the story unfolded. "Holy shit," she breathed when Melody finished. "So, you're telling me that not only did you stand up to Elaine Montgomery, but you potentially changed audition practices for like every major theater in the country?" "That might be overstating it a bit," Melody demurred, "and it was mostly Nate's doing." "Bullshit," Zoe declared, pointing an accusatory finger. "Your husband may have the money and connections, but this was your idea. Own it, girl." Dina arrived with their coffees, setting them down with a motherly smile. "You two plotting world domination again?" "Theater domination," Zoe corrected. "Much more difficult." When Dina had gone, Zoe leaned forward eagerly. "So, Glass Menagerie, you're going to audition?" "I think so," Melody replied, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "But I'm nervous. What if I go through all this, push for these changes, and then still don't get cast?" "Then you audition somewhere else," Zoe said pragmatically. "But at least you'll know it was a fair rejection based on your performance, not your clothes or your resume." "True." Melody sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "It's just for so long I've defined success as getting a role at a place like the Archer. What if I get a fair shot and it turns out I'm not good enough?" "First of all, you are good enough," Zoe insisted. "I've seen you perform, remember? You made me cry with that monologue from Doubt. You're my best friend. You're biased." "I'm your best friend because I'm honest," Zoe countered. "And honestly, you're one of the most talented actresses I know. But even if you don't get this particular role, that doesn't define your worth as an artist." She reached across the table and squeezed Melody's hand. "You just helped change a system that's been keeping people like us on the outside for generations. That's a bigger contribution to theater than any single performance could ever be." Melody hadn't thought of it that way before. "I suppose you're right." "Of course I'm right." Now, more importantly, Zoe's tone shifted to conspiratorial. "What are you going to wear to Thanksgiving dinner with the in-laws? Because after this power move, I'm guessing even your mother-in-law will be impressed." Melody groaned. "Don't remind me. Diana Foster has been trying to dress me since the day Nate introduced us." "Maybe let her this once," Zoe suggested with a grin. "Consider it a peace offering." "Speaking of peace offerings," Melody said, glancing at her phone as a text notification appeared. "Nate wants to know if we're still on for dinner at the Astoria tonight with his dad. Richard Foster wants to have dinner with you, the same man who had you investigated when you started dating his son." "The very same." Zoe shook her head in amazement. "Damn, girl, you've had quite the 24 hours. As they finished their coffee, Melody realized something had shifted within her, a weight lifted, a confidence found. Regardless of what happened with the Archer audition, she had discovered her voice and used it to effect real change. That felt like success, on an entirely different level. "I should get going," she said, gathering her things. "I have a monologue to prepare." Zoe raised her coffee mug in a mock toast to Melody Carter, theater revolutionary. Melody laughed, but there was truth in the jest. She had walked into the Archer Theatre yesterday as someone seeking approval and validation from a system designed to exclude her. She was walking away today as someone who had begun to reshape that system itself. The afternoon sun warmed her face as she stepped outside, heading not toward home, but toward the small park where she often rehearsed when the apartment felt too confining. There, among the trees and open sky, she would begin preparing for an audition that, regardless of outcome, represented something she'd fought for and earned, a fair chance. For the first time in her career, that felt like enough. The Astoria restaurant glittered with quiet opulence, its Art Deco chandeliers casting warm light over tables draped in pristine white linen. A pianist played soft jazz in the corner, while waiters in formal attire moved with practiced efficiency between tables. Richard Foster sat at his usual corner table, checking his watch as he sipped a glass of 30-year-old scotch. He spotted Melody and Nate the moment they entered, his keen eyes taking in his daughter-in-law's elegant blue dress and his son's protective hand at the small of her back. They made a striking couple, Nate with his commanding presence inherited from generations of foster men, and Melody with her understated beauty and newly discovered confidence. "Right on time," Richard commented as they approached, rising to kiss Melody's cheek and shake his son's hand. "I've already ordered the 82 Bordeaux. I thought we had something to celebrate." "The board approval or your unexpected phone call?" "To Elaine Montgomery this morning," Nate asked, holding Melody's chair before taking his own seat. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "News travels fast." "In Boston theater circles? Like wildfire," Melody confirmed. "Especially when it involves the Foster name." A waiter appeared with the wine, presenting the bottle to Richard with practiced deference. After the ritual of approval and pouring, Richard raised his glass in a toast. "To making a difference," he said, his eyes meeting Melody's. "And to family members who push us to be better than we are." They clinked glasses, and Melody felt a strange sense of acceptance she'd never quite experienced around her father-in-law before. For 3 years, Richard had been unfailingly polite but distant, as though reserving judgment on his son's choice of partner. Tonight, something had shifted. "So," Richard said after they'd ordered, "Elaine Montgomery has invited you to audition for their spring production. Will you accept?" "Yes," Melody replied, "through their new blind audition process." "Brave," Richard commented. "Many would take the easier path now that options are available." "That was never the point," she said simply. Richard nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. "Nathaniel tells me you've been working at a coffee shop while pursuing acting." "Perks Coffee, yes, for almost 2 years now. Will you continue there?" The question caught Melody off guard. She glanced at Nate, who gave an almost imperceptible shrug, leaving the decision entirely to her. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Part of me thinks I should, to keep my feet on the ground. But another part wonders if that time could be better spent on auditions and preparation now that things might be opening up." "A practical consideration," Richard acknowledged, "though there's value in understanding what ordinary people experience. It informs your art." "That's what I've always thought," Melody agreed, surprised to find common ground with her intimidating father-in-law. As the evening progressed, Melody found herself gradually relaxing in Richard's company. Beneath his formidable exterior lurked a sharp wit and genuine passion for the arts that she'd never glimpsed before. He spoke knowledgeably about theatre history and performance traditions, revealing that in his youth he'd briefly considered acting before the family business pulled him in another direction. "I saw Olivier play Othello in London in '65, he reminisced. "Changed how I thought about Shakespeare forever. That's the power of a truly transcendent performance. It alters your understanding of what's possible." "Is that why Foster Media has always supported the arts?" Melody asked. "Because of your personal interest?" Richard considered the question as he swirled the wine in his glass. "Partially, but also because art challenges assumptions. It makes people question the status quo." He smiled slightly. "Not unlike what you did yesterday." By the time dessert arrived, Melody felt as though she was seeing her father-in-law clearly for the first time. Not as the imposing patriarch of the Foster Empire, but as a complex man who valued conviction and courage, perhaps even more than the business acumen that had built his fortune. "I have a confession to make," Richard said as coffee was served. "When Nathaniel first told me about you, I had my doubts, not because you were an actress," he raised a hand to forestall her objection, "but because you seemed content with obscurity. I couldn't understand why someone with genuine talent wouldn't leverage every advantage to succeed. Even advantages I hadn't earned," Melody challenged gently. "Even those," Richard admitted. "In my world, advantages are tools. Not using them seemed wasteful. And now? Now I see that your insistence on making your own way wasn't a lack of ambition, but a different kind of strength." He glanced at his son, "one that complements Nathaniel's rather well." After dinner, as they waited for the valet to bring their car, Richard pulled Nate aside for a private word while Melody stood beneath the restaurant's elegant portico. "What did your father want?" she asked when Nate rejoined her. "To tell me I'd better not mess things up with you," Nate replied with a wry smile. "Apparently, you're the best thing that's happened to the Foster family in generations." He did not say that, not in those exact words, but the sentiment was clear. Nate wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I think you've won him over completely." "Wonders never cease," Melody murmured, leaning into his embrace. The Tesla arrived, and as they drove home through Boston's glittering nightscape, Melody felt a strange sense of possibility unfurling before her, not just for her career, but for their life together. Something fundamental had shifted in the past 24 hours, opening doors she hadn't even known existed. 4 weeks later, Melody sat in the small recording studio Nate had helped her set up in their spare bedroom, reviewing her audition video one last time before submission. The blind audition process for The Glass Menagerie required each actress to record her monologue against a neutral background, with no name or identifying information attached to the file. "What do you think?" she asked Zoe, who lounged on the small sofa against the wall, watching critically. "I think it's perfect," Zoe declared. "Your Laura is heartbreaking, vulnerable without being pathetic. It's exactly how Tennessee Williams meant her to be." Melody bit her lip, unconvinced. "I don't know, maybe I should try one more take. The emotion feels a little forced in the middle section." "Mel, stop." Zoe sat forward, fixing her friend with an exasperated look. "You've done 17 takes. 17. This one is brilliant, and if you do any more, you'll start overthinking and ruin it." "You're right," Melody sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "I'm just nervous. This feels different from other auditions." "Because you helped create the process," Zoe suggested, "or because you know Elaine Montgomery will eventually see it?" "Both. Neither." Melody shrugged helplessly. "Because for the first time, I know I'll be judged fairly on my performance alone. It's terrifying not to have anything else to blame if I don't get it." Zoe crossed the room and wrapped an arm around Melody's shoulders. "That's the whole point, right? A fair shot, right?" Melody took a deep breath and clicked the submit button. Her audition file uploaded to the Archer's new digital submission portal, joining dozens of others that would be evaluated without names or faces attached. Done. Now we celebrate, Zoe announced, pulling a bottle of champagne from her tote bag. Because regardless of what happens next, you've already won. 2 days later, Melody stood in the kitchen of her apartment, chopping vegetables for dinner while Nate leaned against the counter beside her, loosened tie and rolled up sleeves, the only concessions to relaxation after his long day at Foster Media. Dad called today, he mentioned, stealing a slice of bell pepper from her cutting board. The board is impressed with the early response to our new funding requirements. 17 theaters have already committed to implementing blind audition processes by next season. 17. That's incredible. Melody smiled, her knife moving in practiced rhythm. Faster than I expected. Most were already considering similar changes, Nate observed. They just needed the incentive to move forward. Your idea gave them that push. Our idea, she corrected. Nate's phone buzzed with an incoming email. He glanced at it casually, then straightened abruptly. It's from the Archer. Melody's knife stilled. What does it say? Dear applicant, he read aloud. Thank you for your submission to the Glass Menagerie auditions. Based on your performance, we would like to invite you to a callback on Thursday at 3 p.m. Please note that this is the first time your submission number has been linked to your identity. Regards, Casting Department, Archer Theatre. Melody stared at him, the knife still suspended above the cutting board. I got a callback. You got a callback, Nate confirmed, his face breaking into a wide grin. Based solely on your performance, just like you wanted. The vegetables forgotten. Melody threw her arms around his neck, laughing as he lifted her off her feet in celebration. For the first time in her career, she'd advanced based purely on her talent. No connections, no appearance, no pedigree. Just her performance, judged on its merits. I have to call Zoe, she said when he set her down. She's been checking her. Email every 5 minutes. Did she submit too? For Amanda Wingfield, yes, she'd be amazing in the role. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Melody found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. The callback invitation had triggered a whirlwind of emotions. Excitement, certainly, but also a new kind of pressure. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted. A fair evaluation of her work. Now she had to prove she deserved it. You're thinking too loudly, Nate murmured, his arm tightening around her waist. I can practically hear the gears turning. Sorry. She turned to face him in the darkness. I'm just realizing that this is only the beginning. Even if the process is fair, the competition is still incredibly fierce. And you're up for the challenge. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You've been ready for this your whole life, Mel. Have I? She wondered aloud. I've spent so long fighting just to get in the door that I'm not sure I know what to do now that I'm inside. The same thing you've always done, Nate replied simply. Pour your heart into your work. The difference is people will actually be watching now. Thursday arrived with crisp autumn sunshine and a brisk wind that carried the first hint of winter. Melody dressed with care for her callback, not in designer clothes or flashy jewelry, but in a simple outfit that felt authentic to her. No more trying to look like someone she wasn't. No more apologies for her background or style. The Archer Theatre looked different somehow as she climbed the steps to its grand entrance. The imposing facade seemed less intimidating, the gleaming doors more welcoming. Inside, the lobby bustled with activity as other callback candidates waited, scripts in hand, nerves evident in their postures and expressions. Melody spotted Zoe immediately, pacing near the reception desk, her wild curls contained in a messy bun. She hurried over, gratified when her friend's face lit up at the sight of her. "You made it!" Zoe exclaimed, pulling her into a quick hug. "I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind." "Just running late," Melody explained. The tea was delayed. Have they started the callbacks? Not yet. They're running behind. Zoe glanced around the lobby, lowering her voice. You should see Isabel Blackwood's face. Apparently, she didn't make it through the blind audition round. She's been calling her father non-stop since yesterday. Melody followed Zoe's gaze to where Isabel stood near the theater doors, her perfectly made-up face tight with anger as she spoke urgently into her phone. For once, Melody felt no satisfaction in another's disappointment, only a quiet acknowledgement that the system was working as intended. Talent, not connections, had determined who stood in this lobby today. Tiffany appeared from the theater, clipboard in hand, her manner professional, but considerably warmer than during Melody's first visit. Callback candidates, please follow me. Ms. Montgomery will see you all together first for some general direction, then individual readings will begin. The group of actors, 8 women and 6 men, filed into the theater behind Tiffany. On stage stood Elaine Montgomery and Cameron Reed, deep in conversation over an open script. They looked up as the candidates entered, and Melody could have sworn Elaine's eyes lingered on her for a moment, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Welcome, everyone, Elaine announced once they had settled into the first few rows. First, congratulations on advancing to this stage. Your performances in the blind audition phase impressed us tremendously. She paced the stage slowly, her posture radiating authority. As you know, The Glass Menagerie is a memory play, fragile, emotional, and deeply personal. Today, we'll be looking not just at individual performances, but at chemistry between potential cast members. We'll work in pairs and groups, experimenting with different combinations. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of readings, redirections, and character explorations. Melody found herself paired with different actors for various scenes, each configuration offering new insights into Laura's relationship with her mother, her brother, and her gentleman caller. Throughout, Elaine watched with piercing intensity, occasionally stepping in to adjust a reading or suggest an alternative approach. What struck Melody most was how different this callback felt from previous auditions. There was a focus on the work itself, on discovering the emotional truth of each character and relationship rather than on superficial factors. Elaine treated every actor with equal respect, regardless of their resume or appearance. During a short break, Melody found herself standing next to Cameron Reed at the water cooler. Nice work with the gentleman caller scene, he commented, his tone surprisingly genuine. You brought something unexpected to Laura's awkwardness. It felt authentic. Thank you, Melody replied, momentarily taken aback by the sincerity in his voice. The blind audition process seems to be working well. Cameron hesitated, then lowered his voice slightly. I was skeptical at first. Thought it was just corporate interference in artistic decisions. He glanced toward where Elaine was speaking with another actor. But I have to admit, this callback group is the strongest I've seen in years. There's more diversity of interpretation. Before Melody could respond, Tiffany appeared to call them back for the final round of readings. She caught Zoe's eye as they returned to their seats, exchanging small smiles of encouragement. Whatever happened next, they had both experienced something remarkable today, a genuine evaluation of their craft. As the callback drew to a close, Elaine addressed the group one final time. Thank you all for your exceptional work today. This won't be an easy decision, which is exactly as it should be. We'll be in touch within the week. Regardless of the outcome, please know that your artistry was seen and appreciated. Outside the theater, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street. Melody and Zoe walked together toward the nearest cafe, both physically and emotionally drained from the intensity of the callback. So, Zoe prompted as they waited for their coffees. How do you feel? Melody considered the question carefully. Peaceful. Oddly enough, I gave everything I had in there. If I get cast, wonderful. If not, she shrugged. At least I know. It was because someone else's interpretation better matched their vision, not because my blazer was from a thrift store. Exactly. Zoe nodded vigorously. I keep thinking about all the auditions I've been to where I knew they'd decided before I even opened my mouth. This was different. Elaine was really listening. The week that followed was strangely calm for Melody. Instead of the usual post-audition anxiety, replaying every moment, second-guessing every choice, she found herself focused on other aspects of her life. She gave notice at Perk's Coffee, packed up her locker, and said goodbye to the job that had sustained her through years of rejection. It felt like closing one chapter to make room for whatever came next. Nate noticed the change in her the moment he returned from a short business trip to New York. "You seem different," he observed as they walked through the public garden one evening, golden leaves crunching beneath their feet. More centered somehow. "I feel different," she admitted. "Whatever happens with this role, something has shifted for me. I'm not defining myself by external validation anymore." "That's called growth," he said, squeezing her hand. "And it looks good on you." Friday morning, Melody's phone rang as she was leaving her weekly voice lesson. Elaine Montgomery's name flashed on the screen. Her heart jumped, but the panic she might have felt before was replaced by a steady readiness to accept whatever news awaited. "Hello?" "Melody, it's Elaine Montgomery. Do you have a moment?" "Of course." She stepped to the side of the sidewalk, out of the flow of pedestrians. "I wanted to call you personally, rather than having Tiffany contact you." Elaine paused. "We've made our casting decisions for the Glass Menagerie." Melody took a deep breath, bracing herself. "I understand. We'd like to offer you the role of Laura Wingfield." The words took a moment to register. "You're offering me the part?" "Yes," Elaine confirmed, a smile evident in her voice. "Your callback was extraordinary, and when we looked at different cast configurations, your chemistry with the actors we've selected for Tom and the Gentleman Caller was undeniable." Thank you," Melody managed, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Thank you for the opportunity." "You earned it," Elaine said simply. "And in case you're wondering, yes, your friend Zoe has been cast as Amanda. Her reading was, well, unlike anything I've seen before, quite remarkable." After arranging to come in the following Monday to sign contracts and receive the rehearsal schedule, Melody ended the call and stood motionless on the sidewalk, pedestrians flowing around her like water around a stone. She had done it. She had actually done it, secured a leading role at the Archer Theatre based solely on her performance. She called Nate first, then Zoe, sharing the news through tears of joy and relief. Both responded with the kind of unrestrained celebration the moment deserved. Nate promising champagne and dinner, Zoe screaming so loudly that Melody had to hold the phone away from her ear. That evening, as they sat on their apartment balcony, with glasses of champagne, watching the city lights come alive against the darkening sky, Nate raised his glass in a toast. "To my incredible wife, who changed not just her own future, but the future of countless other actors." Melody clinked her glass against his. "And to second chances, both the ones we're given and the ones we create for ourselves." Later, after Nate had fallen asleep, Melody stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the Boston skyline. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the years of struggle, the countless rejections, the moment of despair that had driven her to make that fateful phone call. One decision, one moment of courage when she'd finally allowed herself to ask for help. It hadn't given her the easy path some might have expected. Instead, it had created the opportunity for a better path, not just for her, but for others like her. As she slipped back into bed beside Nate, Melody realized that perhaps the greatest role she would ever play wasn't Laura Wingfield or any other character on a stage. It was the role she'd claimed for herself. A woman who refused to accept that the world couldn't change, who had the courage to challenge systems that needed challenging, and who understood that true success wasn't about individual triumph, but about creating opportunities for others to shine as well. That was a role worth playing for a lifetime. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.